Well, good morning again, everyone. And Wendy did a great job of intuiting where we're coming from today and where we're going today. Shush, shush, just shush. Be still and know. Beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing. Shush, shush. Shakespeare tells us that there is nothing that is right nor wrong, except that thinking makes it so. If we could shush that thinking, there would be no right or wrong. There would just be. So for the last few weeks, we have been talking about the concept that what we are looking for is already within us. Now, we are coming to the time of the year in our culture of Christmas, which is about discovering the Christ. And the Christ, as we teach it, as we understand it, is the awareness of the place or the point where the divine becomes human, where the divine becomes human. This is the Christ. It is a principle more so than a person. But yet it is personal because it is within every one of us, within every one of us. If you think of the layout of Scripture as we have it in our culture, of consisting of Old Testament and New Testament, it starts with this idea of the Garden of Eden, where the soul is living in a state, I would say, of purity, before right or wrong, purity, innocence. Now it's interesting, if you look in the dictionary for the definition of innocence, it will tell you without guilt. But I'm going to suggest a different understanding when we look at the metaphor of the Garden of Eden. It is without a concept of right or wrong. It is before the concept of right or wrong. It is before thinking occurs to make something either right or wrong. If we think of an infant, of a small child who has not yet developed the social construct of what is right or wrong for that particular society. Excuse me while I get a drink. And I think it's important for us to recognize this, that right and wrong is largely a construct of the society in which we live. The things that are right in one society are wrong in another, vice versa. So we have an infant that simply is. It simply is. It is pure life expressing itself perfectly for its stage of development. And it is without concept of right nor wrong. It just simply is. So now you go to pick up this child, you go to pick up this little baby, and you take it and you hold it in your arms and you put it to your shoulder. You're sitting in the rocking chair. Remember I said the other week, sitting in the rocking chair, patting this little one on the back. And it reaches out and it grabs a piece of your jewelry. Maybe you've got a chain of some sort around your neck, a necklace or an earring or something, but the little one reaches out and grabs that and takes it. And you have to struggle to get it back because it's holding on tight in those tiny little hands. They can grasp things much smaller than you and I can. And it's just holding on to it. It's just holding on to it dearly. It's just holding on to it. Now, did it steal from you? Is the baby a thief? It took something that belonged to you. It took something without asking permission. But we don't think of that child as a thief, even though what it did was to take something that was not its, didn't belong to it. But the point is that it is before the concepts of right and wrong, before the concepts of good and evil, before the knowledge of good and evil. It simply is. And even though it has something that belongs to you, you would not say that it is a thief. The term cannot apply if the concept of right and wrong does not exist. To me, this is the metaphor of the Garden of Eden. Remember, I told you the other week that I attended a lecture from the local Native American Studies Center, and it was on Native American mythology, and I was kind of reminded and amazed at the similarities between the creation myths of different cultures. There's a lot of generative themes or motives, if you want to call them that run through these different creation myths. And here in the Garden of Eden, we have this concept of perfect innocence, which is not without guilt, because it didn't do anything wrong. It is without guilt because there is no such thing as guilt. There cannot be guilt without the knowledge of guilt. There just is. You see, there just is. It's the isness. It is the suchness. The child has no concept that it did anything wrong. It could have no concept that it did anything wrong. It hasn't developed those concepts yet. It is pure. It is pure. So what we are told in the metaphor of the Garden of Eden is there's a point where the soul, represented by Adam and Eve, the soul is living in this state before the awareness of the concepts of right and wrong, before the awareness of the concepts of good and evil. But somewhere along the line, and we're told in that story, we are told it's an act of disobedience, of eating the apple that they were told not to eat. But somewhere along the line, the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil entered into their consciousness, entered into the human consciousness. So it is knowledge, it is thinking, it is the activity of the monkey mind that is keeping us from finding the Christ, the gem, the place within us where the divine already is. It has created us out of itself. It has left us alone to make this discovery. It is lying in sweet repose, quiet repose, as the poet tells us, and it is just waiting our discovery. And yet, as we talked in the example of the person looking for the gemstone in the pond, they keep moving their hand in the water and they can't find what they're looking for because of all of the activity. Right? The mud is stirred up, the surface of the pond is rippling, and the one thing that they want that is down there, the precious gem, they can't get because their own activity is getting in the way. I gave you the example of the man who during the Second World War, the magician who was used his talents to camouflage things, to disguise things so that the enemy couldn't see them. And he had to come up with a way of protecting the Suez Canal from attacks at night. And how do you hide something that big? How do you hide something that's straight? And he did it by coming up with a series of lights and mirrors. And the mirrors rotated and reflected the light and created kind of a screen of light over the canal so that the pilots from the planes above could not see that which was there, but they could not see because they were distracted by the light. Now, what we were trying to get to here is that we think, or at least we think. There is this activity of mind that we call thought, and it gets in the way. It gets in the way. It causes the ripples on the pond. It stirs up the mud. It is that light that distracts us, that keeps us from discovering that which is already there, which is this pure state, which is this place that is beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. It is the pure existence, the isness, the suchness, the I amness, the beingness that the different teachers talk about. So we have this sort of problem, or this sort of dichotomy that we are living with, which is we come from a place before thoughts. The Upanishads tell us that which is before thought, but from which thoughts come. The divine. The place before thoughts, but from which thoughts come. And we have left that place. We have left that place. And we have entered into the realm of thought. We have entered into the realm of thinking, where thinking makes things right and wrong. It is the knowledge of good and evil, right, that drove Adam and Eve, or caused them to leave the garden. And we wonder, well, how, if this is where we have come from, if this is the origin, and this is where we are returning, right? Because the other part of the mythology is that there's another tree in the garden. There's a tree of life. And we are trying to get back to that tree of life. And there's two cherubim, there's two guards at the gate that are protecting, that are keeping us from going back. And in the Buddhist mythology, we have a very similar image of the Buddha in quiet repose in the cave with his hand, the palm of his hand held up facing outward like a crossing guard, like stop or shush, shush, shush. These two guards at the gate, they are activities of our own mind. They are our desires, and they are our fears. And in that very simple image of these two cherubim or these two guards standing at the gate, whether it be guarding against people getting into the Garden of Eden or getting into the quiet repose, the peacefulness of the Buddha, it is a similar imagery. We have to shush. We have to shush our mind, because they are only creations of our own mind. Thinking has made them so. Thinking has made them so. Now, part of what happens to us, I mentioned several times, I've talked about walking the razor's edge. Walking the razor's edge is another metaphor that we get from the East. And to me, what that means is we have an intellect. We are not the intellect. I want to make that clear. We are not the intellect. We think we are, but we are not the intellect. We have intellect. We use intellect. And the intellect can tell us, inform us, that there is a place where the intellect doesn't work. A place where it no longer functions. And we want to get to that place. You see, it is that place that is both before the ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, before the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. And it is the place that has transcended that knowledge, that has transcended that knowledge. See, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We can't unring the bell. We have come from a state of being that was pure innocence, that had no concept of right doing or wrongdoing. And we have entered into the world of the intellect, which is full of judgment and full of the idea of right doing and wrongdoing. And the intellect at some point wakes up and says, but we must transcend that. See, we can't go back in time, but we can transcend it. We can remove ourselves from it. We can get away from it. So therein becomes the kind of the focal point, or the goal, if you want to call it that, of our spiritual growth. What is it that we are trying to do here? We are trying to go beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. We're trying to go beyond mind itself. We are trying to shush the chatter of the monkey mind that is going back and forth all the time and preventing us from seeing clearly that which is already there. We are trying to shush our fears. We are trying to shush our desires, our attachments, our grasping, our aversion, all of these things that keep us busy but keep us from experiencing that which we truly want. Right? Again, I will go back to the story of the monkey awakening inside the house and being trapped inside the house. And at first it tries to escape, but then after a while it just occupies itself with exploring the house, making it more comfortable, installing air conditioning and color TV and all these other things that we do that are diversions of the mind. So on the one hand, the good news is we can think, and on the other hand, the bad news is that we can think. But it is this uncontrolled thinking, or it is this untrained thought that is the problem. Dr. Holmes tells us that trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. It is this mind that is just kind of running willy-nilly and absorbing all kinds of strange ideas from the culture in which it has awakened. And it is just undisciplined, if you want to think of it that way. It flits from here to there to everywhere. So it is often likened to grasshopper mind, hopping from here to there, butterfly mind flitting from here to there, monkey mind swinging from here to there to everywhere. So we start to, the intellect starts to tell us that there's something else, there's something more, there's something from which we have come, but we can't go backwards, and we have to go forward, and then we have to transcend this trap that we are stuck in, this trap of our own device, if you will. You remember when we were kids, we had the little handcuffs that you put on your fingers? It was a little paper thing, and you put your fingers in there, and the harder you pulled on them, the tighter they became. You couldn't get your fingers out of them. And we're kind of stuck in that. Another picture that we were given is in some places they hunted the monkey for food. And the way that they trapped them was they took a gourd and they put a tiny hole in the gourd, just big enough for the monkey to get its hand into. But then they filled the gourd with pieces of dried fruit. And the monkey would come along and realize that there was dried food in there, and it would stick its paw in, and it would get a big handful of that fruit. And then it would try to pull its hand out, but it couldn't. It couldn't, because it had its fist full of fruit. And the monkey would stay there pulling, trying to get its fist out of the gourd, until the hunters came back and got it. See, it never let go. Shush, shush. It never let go. It was holding on to, it was holding on to the very thing that was holding it back. It was holding on to the very thing that was holding it back. And we are like that. The example is that we are like that. We become enamored with thought. We become enamored with this idea of who we are, the ego. The intellect is constantly busy labeling and judging and numbering and counting and analyzing and doing all of these things. Excuse me while I get some more water. It becomes so normal to us. It is what we identify with, and that's an important concept. What do you identify with? We identify with the chatter. We identify with the ripples on the surface of the water. And at some point, we want to move forward. We want to transcend that. We want to get beyond the diversions of the mind, the distractions of the mind. Now, part of the problem, one of the things that we have learned, what we have grown up with, is this idea of struggle and subjugation. We think that if we want to be done with something, we need to beat it down, beat it into the ground, if you will. So we have this concept of good and this concept of evil. We have the knowledge of good, we have the knowledge of evil. And as we become aware of it, our tendency is to struggle. Our tendency is to fight. Our tendency is once we label something as bad, we want to put it down. We want to struggle against it. We want to push it away somewhere. And we can't do that. See, we can never succeed at doing that. We have to transcend it. We have to transform it. We have to, as the alchemist of old would do, we have to turn the lead into gold. You know. We get another beautiful metaphor from the East, and it says, no mud, no lotus. The lotus flower is a beautiful flower, but it has its roots down in the mud. And if we try to remove it from the mud, if we try to say this mud that we call dirty or yucky or nasty or evil, if we try to pretend it does not exist, there will be no lotus. We have to be able to accept things as they are and allow them to blossom into the beauty, into the flower. So you might remember the story of the rich sultan in the Middle East who offered to give his palace to anyone who could spend the night there without thinking of a white elephant. And of course no one could. Because when you're trying not to think, you're thinking about not thinking. Right? It sounds like double talk. But the more you try not to think, I'm not thinking, yes you are, yes you are. See? When we struggle with something, when we struggle against something, we are stuck with it like that monkey with its hand stuck in the gourd. We are stuck with it. And the activity of our mind of staying in the stuckness is the very thing that is keeping us from transcending it. So one of the things that we want to do as we go forward is, and this is nothing new, right? Judge not and you shall not be judged. Stop labeling. Stop identifying. Stop trying to analyze. Shush, shush, shush. Just be still. Just be still. Now the other thing that happened, now one of the things I just wanted to mention here, I'll just toss that in here, is that we have grown up in a society and in a culture that almost worships the intellect. You know, the intellect is supreme. It believes the intellect can know everything and the intellect can solve everything. And there's nothing wrong with the intellect. It does a lot of good for us. But it is not all that there is. And I just want to point out one little fallacy that we have grown up with. Here in the U.S., we have inherited our system of logic from the Greeks. And in that system of logic, it is very simple. It's a very binary system. Something is either true or it is false. That's it. It is true or it is false. It is or it isn't. Those are the two choices. You know. But there's an older system of logic in the world. It comes to us from India. And in that system of logic, something might be true, or it might be false, or it might be both true and false, or it might be neither true nor false. Now, the first time I heard this, I thought to myself, well, that is nonsense. It's either true or it's false. It is or it isn't. And now we have somebody saying, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, maybe it both is and isn't, and maybe it neither is nor isn't. And we say, well, that's crazy. But then we get into the world of quantum physics. And the binary is or isn't doesn't work. Is light a wave? Yes. Is light a particle? Yes. Is light both a wave and a particle? Maybe. Is light neither a wave nor a particle? Maybe. So my point in bringing that up is that we have grown to think that the intellect is so supreme and so superior, and then it has these little problems. It just doesn't know. See, it cannot explain. So we have to be willing to accept the limitations. We have to be willing to accept that there are other ways of knowing. That there are places that the intellect can't go. But nevertheless they are. Nevertheless they exist. And this is what is represented by getting back past those cherubim, past those guards. We must transcend. We must transcend. See, we have moved from innocence to ideas of right doing and wrong doing, and now we must transcend them. So I want you to think for a minute that, for example, of light and dark. We use that a lot, light and dark. Now, in this idea of binary, in this idea of right doing and wrong doing, it is if it's dark, it's not light. If it's light, it's not dark. And it seems as if they are two opposites, light and dark. But what if we were to think of them as just two different spots on the continuum, on a continuum of a light scale? So let's say we started off with the light scale with 0 light, and that's dark, and we went up to 100 on the light scale, and that's complete brightness. So rather than thinking of light and dark as being exactly the opposite of one another, they are the same thing. They're the same thing. Just in expressing in a different way. Just perhaps in a different quantity. If you have a dimmer switch on your chandelier in your dining room, you just turn it. And as you turn it, the rheostat in there adjusts the electric current, and the light gets dimmer or the light gets brighter. In fact, they call it a dimmer switch. But the light doesn't stop being light when you turn the dial down. The light bulbs don't suddenly magically change into something else. They're just expressing the level of light in a different way. So where we are then is that the activity of the intellect, which is constantly labeling things right or wrong or this or that or the other, is an activity which is good in its place, But when it is overused, when we are trying to meditate, for example, and it keeps chattering, then it becomes an obstacle. It becomes an obstacle. You hear the Buddhists talk about this a lot. Obstacles. What are the obstacles? The obstacles to our experience. So what we are talking about then is there comes a time when we have to learn to shush. To shush. Oh, just be quiet. Shush. Shush. We've got to get the monkey mind to settle down. And we can't struggle against it. Because this was my first idea of meditating when I first tried in the 70s was I'm going to sit here and I'm going to stop thought. You know, that didn't work. That didn't work. Because the more I thought about stopping thought, the more I was thinking, and the less I was succeeding. And I finally decided that this was a fool's errand and nobody could do it. What we want to do is stop identifying with the thought. We want to simply observe the thought. See, if we go to meditate and we say, I'm going to have to struggle, I'm going to have to settle this monkey mind down, I'm going to have, now we got our ego involved. Now we have set up a conflict that doesn't need to be there. All we want to do is observe. Observe. Just observe. So the way that we're talking about shushing today is to simply observe. Let go of the need to label something as right or wrong. It just is. It's somewhere on a continuum. It just is, you see. And part of the problem that we have is that we try to fight against the things that have been labeled as bad, and yet we each have part of that in us. So we might have been taught that greed is bad. So now we have to struggle against greed, and we have to pretend that we don't have desires. We have to pretend that we don't want things for ourselves. We project that onto other people. Other people are just greedy people, but we're not like that kind of thing. And in our society, what we tend to do is we defer. We defer the things that we don't like in the world here today. We defer to heaven. So here it's not good to want stuff, but when you get to heaven, you're going to have everything. You see. So we tend to take these things and just distort them in time or distort them in our thinking or move them along, and we don't want to do that. See, we don't want to do that at all. Greed exists. Anger exists. It is. We don't have to fight with it. We don't have to struggle with it. We just observe it, you see. When we were watching the video with Matthew Ricard, he was talking about anger, and he said just observe it. And when we take the time to just observe something, it dissipates like the frost under the sunlight, you see. Just observe it. Just observe it. So rather than wasting a lot of time and energy saying, well, my anger is justified. I have a right to be angry. How many times people do that? You imagine what Facebook would look like without fear, without anger? Imagine what it would look like. How many times people will do something and say, well, I have a right to be upset about this. Wouldn't it be better to just say, anger exists, anger exists. It is here. It'll pass. I don't have to get too excited about it. I don't have to act out on it. I don't have to go punch anybody in the nose. It's just, yes, anger exists. So the first step along the way is, rather than getting our intellect entangled with struggling with itself about whether something is good or something is bad or whether we should have it or we shouldn't have, just acknowledge it. It exists. It exists. And that's it. Just acknowledge it. Now what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is we are going to go over some techniques, right? Spiritual practice. We're going to go over some techniques. And what these techniques are for is to get us out of our head, to get us out of our head. We can become the observer of thought. We don't have to struggle against it. And we learn this in meditation. Here comes a thought. There goes a thought. I am not the thought. You see, I am not the thought. And this is key. So if the thought is an angry thought, here comes an angry thought. There goes an angry thought, but I am not angry. Anger exists, but I am not angry. I am observing the anger. I am observing the greed. I am not judging it as good or bad. I am just acknowledging it exists. It is there. It has come. It has gone. See? And I am unmoved by it. I am unmoved by it. I haven't tried to stop it. I haven't tried to keep it from creeping into my field of view. I haven't tried to hurry it along on its way out. I just observed it. Oh, look, there goes a thought. Oh, look, there goes a thought. By breaking our identity with this activity of the chatter of the monkey mind, you see, then we can start to move past the fear, past the desire. We don't have to hold on to something. We don't have to be afraid of anything. We can step beyond. All right, so activity number one I'm going to give us. This is a couple of physiological techniques, comes to us from Zen. In other words, sometimes the activity of the intellect follows the body. we were watching a video last week about people who went on a journey in Peru with a Peruvian mystic who took them around through the initiation rites of this particular culture. And one of them was very similar to a baptism, but he had them jump into a cold mountain lake. And one of the participants said, when they hit the water, thoughts stopped. And I said, I can relate to that. Have you ever jumped in a pond and go, the thought has just stopped. It just stopped. There was a physiological change to your body, but your intellect stopped. And that's a good one to start with, because just drawing in your tummy, just suck it up, just bring it in. Sometimes just that little tightening of the stomach, just bringing the solar plexus in, that is enough to break the pattern of thought. So if you find yourself, if you're stuck in your head, if you're caught up in your thoughts, if you're arguing with yourself, if you're arguing with somebody else, just draw in your gut. Now in meditation, there's a technique where you bring your belly out like a balloon, like a beach ball. You breathe into your belly. And then as you exhale in short breaths where you stop, you halt quickly. And by doing that, you have to draw your stomach in and then tighten it up. Draw your stomach in and then tighten it up. Draw your stomach in and then tighten it up. So you may wish to try, when you have the time to meditate, you may want to try breathing in this particular way. But more importantly, during the day, if you find yourself getting caught up in your head, getting overly engaged with your thoughts, losing your ability to be the observer of what's going on in your world, just try sucking your gut in. Just try, just like you hit that cold pond. And just bring the tension in your belly, bring it in, and see if that doesn't allow you to break out of your thought. Right? Thinking may still occur. It should. It's going on. But you're not caught up in it. That's the important thing. You're not entangled with your thoughts. The second technique is to bring your attention between your eyebrows. Kind of close your eyes and point up to your third eye, in between your eyebrows. And at the same time, curl the tip of your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. Right? So you just want to roll your eyes and bring your tongue in. Just for a moment. just for a moment. And the more you practice doing that, the easier it becomes. And again, bringing attention to that spot. I guess that's why it's considered a sacred spot in some cultures. But bringing your attention to that spot somehow seems to focus, seems to allow you to focus. And the extraneous noise that's going on in the chatter in your head stops momentarily. So those are just two physiological techniques that you can do. Each of them only takes a second or so. Sometimes I try to combine the two, kind of bring my attention to my third eye, bring my tongue to the roof of my mouth, and suck my gut in all at the same time. But the point is shush. Shush. Now shush in itself, palm of the hand, stop, shush. That's another technique as well. Right? You find yourself caught up in the middle of this huge argument inside your head. Shush. 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 Move beyond that. Move beyond that. Okay, so 2 techniques so far. Sucking in the gut, tightening your gut at the solar plexus, bringing your attention to your third eye, touching the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Third technique. This is one that you want to practice like when you have time, when you're at home. And you want to imagine yourself headless. Now, in our culture, what has happened is we have identified here that we are somehow in our head. Right? And people will say, I think, and they'll point to their head, or a little light bulb goes off above the head in the cartoons. But we believe in our society that our consciousness is inside our head. You'll hear things like, well, the brain causes consciousness. Does it? Does it really? So we are stuck in our heads. I said a couple of weeks ago, we got to get from our heads to our hearts. So one of the things that we can do is learn to just imagine yourself without a head. Just imagine what that would be like to have a head. Where does thinking occur if you don't have a head, you see? Other cultures, it's in the navel. The solar plexus is the root of consciousness. We believe it's in the head. Can you move it from your head to your solar plexus? Can you practice that? Can you just close your eyes and imagine what it would be like to exist but not have a head? It's very hard. It's very hard indeed to do that. But if we can practice doing that, we can learn to bring our consciousness out of the intellect, out of the head, and hopefully into the heart. The heart is a good place to start. Now that brings us to love, right? So the third practice, imagine yourself without a head. But the third practice we talked about the other week, which is love, you see, love. Because love is not an intellectual thing. God is not an intellectual exercise. God is love. What can we do to feel and experience love? What is it? What can you do to feel and to experience the love? For many people, it's a pet. It's an unconditional love of a pet. Many of us, our children are grown, they've left the house. They're all grown on their own and got kids of their own. And it's a pet. But can you be there in that unconditional love with whatever it is? At that moment, whatever it is. And then can we expand, can we extend that experience of oneness to all creation, to all creation. I was reading a little bit this morning in Osho, and he was saying, the difference between knowing something intellectually and really having it. And he was talking about nonviolence in India, the philosophy of nonviolence. And the question came up, there was some author who wrote a book, and the question was the nonviolence of Gandhi authentic, or was it just a political movement, see, that worked? And the example that Osho gave was that Gandhi went to visit a poet famous poet in India, and said to the poet, let's go walk on the lawn. Let's go for a walk on the lawn. And the poet said, I can't do that. I can't do that. Because each blade of grass is living. Each blade of grass is a living entity. And who am I to trample on the grass? And Gandhi got it. Gandhi got it. Yes. Yes, this is nonviolence. This is nonviolence taking all the way. In India, there was there's a religion of the I don't know that I can pronounce it right, Jains, Johns or Jains. But these were people who would not walk because they did not want to step on an ant or a worm or a living creature. Can we start to bring our love, our experience of unity to all beings, to all forms of life? And one of the best ways to do this, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, is gratitude. Can we see the presence and the activity of God in all things? In all things. This mindfulness, this awareness of what is going on around us, what is going on within us, Here in our society, when we eat, it's just something we do. We pull up to the drive-in window and they stick stuff in a bag into the car, and we start devouring it. But food is divine. Food is divine. Food is the very substance of the divine providing for itself as us. Every meal is communion, you see. Every meal is a miracle. How our bodies can take the nourishment of the food and turn it into whatever our body needs at the moment. It is our unity with life, you see. And we don't take time to acknowledge that. We don't take time to pay attention to that. We're hungry, we grab a burger, boom, we eat it while we're driving, we're done. Till we get hungry again. Can we take the time to realize that in this moment of eating, divine life is providing for divine life? Can we feel that love? Can we feel that love? All right, so we've got 4 techniques now. And now the last one that I want to discuss for today is to do something creative, to be engaged in something creative, an art, music, poetry, dance. Do these things. Now here's just something to consider. That in our rules of what is right and what is wrong, in our rules that society has made, there is a certain way to play an instrument. There is a certain way to tune an instrument. There's a certain way to dance. There's a certain way to paint. And all of these things are constructs. Dance should be a spontaneous movement, the groove. If you want to try something funny this afternoon, just look for YouTube videos on musicians trying to explain what the groove is. Tell me, what is the groove in music? It's ineffable. It's mystical. But something moves the body. Something moves the body. Our body perceives the movement of the music, and our body starts to move, and that is the dance. And yet as soon as we do that, we are self-conscious, you see. Am I doing it right? Is everybody looking at me? Am I dancing the right way? Do I even know this? Yada, 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 yada. Shush. 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 Dance. Be the dance. Dance. So do it when there's nobody around. Turn on the music and just let your body Move with the music. Whatever way you want it to move, that's the right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. There is no right. There is no wrong. Just be the dance. You see, just flow with the music. The same thing with an instrument. You know, if you have an instrument, play it. I don't care whether you think you're good at it or you're not good at it. Just play it. Just let your fingers go. If it's a flute, just blow into it. Just play it, you see. Get a pencil, get some paper, doodle and draw, and forget about judging whether it's good enough, or it's bad enough. Just doodle, just draw. Go down to the store and get a set of finger paints and some poster paper. And just feel it, just touch it, just move it. But get out of your head. Get out of your head, see? And get into the art. Get into the art. And I'm not talking about analyzing the art. Okay? This is something incredible that we do in our society. We went to visit our son in Seattle some years ago, and he took us out to the wineries, and we went on our wine tasting, And I don't know whether we were tasting the wine or we were learning the lingo, Suddenly drinking wine became an analytical experience. Smell the roses. Don't analyze the fragrance. All right? So we've talked too long about not talking. We've talked too long about shushing. We must practice it. We must practice it now. So during this week, I've given you, I think, 5 different techniques. There's more. Find your own. When you must first be aware of the activity of thought. Just be aware of it. And when you find yourself overly identifying with it and being caught up with it, shush, shush. Use one of those 5 techniques. Shush, shush. Take time for your spiritual practice in the morning, in the evening, during the day. Shush, shush. See, then, as Rumi told us, when we go into the quiet, then we can hear, but not with the ears, with the heart. Everything we're looking for is already here. We just have to quiet the monkey mind to experience it. And so it is.